Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel called Zuzanareacts, where I learn all things Para with your help, and I just share my Slovak Central European point of view. In today's video we're going to look into Africa and how India is planning to overtake Africa. Now Africa is a continent with a huge natural resources, with everyone kind of wants to have a piece of it. Like France still has a piece of it, it's being kicked out now. China has been dominating, I think, lately Africa, and just been trying to help with the build of infrastructure, lots of things. And now it looks like India is planning to secretly beat China in that continent. And I'm very curious what the Indian plans are. But before we jump and realize what they are,
please like this video and click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thank you so much for your support.
All right, let's see how India secretly plans to beat China and Africa together.
This is the country of Nigeria. Here, several Indian companies are making massive inroads with nearly $14 billion in investments.
By the way, sorry to pause it the second we started. You know how I had a friend, I used to live with a girl from Nigeria, and they call it Niger. It's so funny. It's been always funny to me. But yeah, so Nigeria is like doubling in their population as well. It's like it has a trajectory of growth of India, so it's interesting to see what they will say.
Jindal Steel and Power, the third largest private steel producer in India, is injecting $3 billion into the Nigeria's steel industry,
wow,
while Indorama Corporation is boosting its petrochemical facilities with an investment of $8 billion. Not just this, the Nigerian government has reached a $1 billion partnership with the Indian government to help strengthen production of defense equipment.
Nigeria has secured nearly $14 billion in pledges from Indian investors for various sectors, including steel, petrochemicals, power generation, and defense.
At first glance, these investments might seem unusual, but if you observe carefully, these investments are part of a carefully calculated move by India, not only in Nigeria, but in the whole of Africa. If you zoom out on this map, you'll see India is adopting a similar strategy in other African countries like Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zambia, Ghana, Mauritius, Egypt, Togo, and Mali. Now, the obvious question is why? Why is India willing to commit such a massive amount of resources into Africa, especially in time of such political and economic turmoil on the continent?
East Africa, where protests are ongoing in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi.
Riot police, some on horseback, have been deployed in the capital, Nairobi.
Almost 140 years ago, in 1884, the Berlin Conference kicked off the scramble for Africa, ushering in an era of European colonialism. The United Kingdom, Germany, France, Portugal, and Belgium, along with others, divided up the continent for their interests. Besides vast natural resources, Africa was also a valuable strategic location for controlling trade routes between Europe and its faraway colonies of India and Asia. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, Africa saw a wave of liberation movements, especially after World War II weakened European powers. From the 1940s to the 1970s, over 45 African countries achieved independence.
In the rapidly changing pattern of African countries, South Africa joins the ranks of independent nations as the country becomes a republic and withdraws from the British Commonwealth of Nations.
The 21st century has seen a renewed scramble for Africa, but this time the intentions are different. One of the key players in this new era is India. With a shared history of colonialism, India and Africa built strong relations during the Cold War, emerging together from imperial rule as part of the non-alignment movement. As India's economic growth surged, it has reignited its interest in Africa, driven by some strategic reasons that we will discuss in some time. Between 1991 and 2022, Indian trade with Africa jumped from $893 million in 1991 to $97.8 billion in 2023. The African Union is now the fourth largest trading partner for India. behind the United States, China, and the United Arab Emirates. The continent is projected to be home to as much as 25% of the global workforce by the end of this decade, and the regional GDP is already $2.6 trillion. Look at this map. These 6 African countries have been booming economically, having been dubbed the lion economies. They have a collective GDP of roughly $1 trillion. Most of them have seen very high growth rates since 2010. This is driving Indian investments in Africa, which is projected to reach $150 billion by 2030. India has already committed $14 billion to Nigeria alone, focusing on steel, petroleum, power plants, and defense industry. Nigeria is not an isolated target for India. Elsewhere, India has bought up offshore blocks in Egypt, Côte d'Ivoire, Libya, and Sudan.
Now, India's outreach to Africa, that has hit yet another milestone. Nigeria, it secured pledges worth $14 billion from Indian investors.
Several Indian companies are actively gaining ground in different industries across the continent. For example, Indian motorcycles have taken the African market by storm due to their affordability and superior quality. Brands like Bajaj and TVS dominate African roads, with Bajaj alone capturing approximately 40% of the market share. Bajaj has sold between 2.4 and 2.7 million two-wheelers in Africa, making it one of the top sellers across more than a dozen African markets. The most popular Indian bike in Africa is the Bajaj Boxer, renowned for its durability and fuel efficiency, which is critical for the diverse and often challenging African terrain. Indian bikes have gained a reputation for being more reliable than Chinese models, which often suffer from poor build quality. In fact, only 2 Indian brands have managed to crush more than 160 Chinese brands across Africa. This is a massive feat for India, but New Delhi's interests are not limited to infrastructure, pharma, automobiles, and petroleum, but it has some bigger plans.
हमारा लक्ष्य है कि 2024-25 तक हम एक्सपोर्ट के इस आंकड़े को 1.5 बिलियन से बढ़ाकर $5 billion तक ले जाएंगे.
In April 2024, India deployed defense attachés to African countries like Tanzania, Mozambique, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Ivory Coast. A defense attaché is a military officer assigned to an embassy in a foreign country. Their job is to act as a bridge between the military of their home country and the host country, promoting their nation's military equipment, specifically focusing on defense exports. India is already making significant inroads, exporting over $500 million worth of defense equipment to African nations between 2017 and 2022. For instance, Indian defense companies have supplied Dhruv advanced light helicopters and surveillance systems to Mauritius, armored vehicles to Mozambique, and Dornier patrol aircraft and radars to Seychelles. These are not significant exports worth praising, but here's what New Delhi is trying to do. On the back of these early inroads, India is now pitching new equipment like the Tejas light combat aircraft, priced at about $42 million each, and the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launcher system. There's also the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, developed jointly by Russia and India, is known for its speed, precision, and versatility, making it a highly sought-after weapon system globally. India recently delivered these missile systems to Philippines in a deal worth $375 million, and countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and United Arab Emirates have shown interest too. If you look at this chart, India's defense exports have surged from $185 million in 2016 to $2.6 billion in 2023, exporting to over 85 countries. India aims to reach $5 billion in defense exports by 2025, with a big chunk expected from Africa. Of course, these exports are no match to the top arms exporters in the world, led by the United States, which is why India is focusing on countries in need of cost-effective and reliable defense solutions, and Africa fits the bill perfectly. The Dhruv helicopter, for example, costs around $8 million, much cheaper than its Western counterparts. If we put the defense exports aside and look at the bigger picture, much of India's interests in Africa have to do with critical minerals and China.
The past 2 decades were witness to China's growth in becoming Africa's largest economic partner.
Between 2000 and 2022, China committed a massive $170 billion to projects in Africa, driven by the Belt and Road Initiative. This 2019 map shows the true scale of Chinese investments made in this vast continent. Some of these are massive in their scale and importance. For example, the railway lines from Mombasa to Nairobi and Addis Ababa to Djibouti, connecting the important ports and financial centers of Africa. China's focus on minerals essential for the EV industry, such as cobalt and lithium, has seen substantial investments in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the country that holds over 60% of the world's cobalt reserves. These strategic moves have not only strengthened China's role in the global EV supply chain, but also gained massive influence across the continent. But this doesn't stop anyone from being suspicious of the so-called Chinese debt trap. As a result, some African countries are rethinking their relationship with China, and some are suspending contracts with Chinese firms.
Niger's military government has decided to suspend its oil exports to China.
The West African nation's consumer watchdog has now shut down the Chinese market.
In April 2020, Tanzanian President John Magufuli threatened to cancel a $10 billion project and labeled it as a killer Chinese loan. Then, Ghana scrapped a $236 million contract to develop an intelligent traffic management system. And then in 2021, DRC President Felix Tshisekedi called for a review of 2008 mining contracts with China, seeking fairer terms since only China is getting richer while the DRC remains poor. On the other hand, Chinese investment inflows are also drying up. In 2016, China lent $28.5 billion in loans to African nations, but by 2022, that figure dropped to less than $1 billion. The risk is that China has overextended itself, allowing India an opportunity to intensify its reach. It won't be easy for India because China has established 25 economic and trade zones in 16 African countries, creating a strong relationship of interdependence, and India cannot dole out credit lines like China did. New Delhi is aware of these limitations and is actively seeking to establish a unique strategy in line with its strengths. So, with China and India locked into a tug-of-war, who has the best chance? But more importantly, is it possible that Africa can be the one that gains the most from this influence war, as they deserve to?
Okay, so I believe this is it to this part of the video. Very interesting. So I knew, as I said at the start, that China had a lot of influence. I didn't realize that the influence was kind of, at least financial one, diminishing. And I don't know, do you guys, any of you know, like how, because if they're dropping contracts, that means that there are things that are not working. I don't know if you know, like the behind the scenes or the economies of how they do the business with Africa. You know, on one hand, it says, right, like, I think when I started to learn about India, it really opened me up to the history of colonies of the Western European countries. So obviously Slovakia never had any colonies. We were slaves to all the countries around. So to me, it's a very it's a topic that I can't fully internalize because it just hasn't been you know, like, also we had, you know, Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Czech kind of kingdom, Polish kingdom. They were all like, Slovakia was part of all of these during the history, and they were more, I would call them imperialistic nations. Slovakia was just not, we're just, you know, happy to be slaves. But you know, I don't think we've obviously experienced colonialism. So for me, it's interesting to learn about it because it's, on one hand, it's interesting to learn. The other, it's kind of hard to relate. Or the more I learn, the more kind of heartbreaking it is, and it's sad that, you know, the countries just like India that had to suffer this colonial rule, then you're gonna, you know, like, that you don't have a chance to, and that's just, I guess, the way the world works, rebuild yourself without needing the dependencies on the other countries coming in. And it's just sad because obviously, like, Africa has a lot of rich natural resources, and I think everyone is after. So, yeah, the defense is an interesting angle to go in. I really do not. I'm aware more of Nigeria and South Africa. I don't really know what's happening in Africa on globe. I know they don't really like the white people. I just work with some people from South Africa and doing projects there, and got to understand the inside about how they perceive like the white people. It's just like it's just interesting because obviously everyone has their own connotation with white people, but not everyone really understands that not all white people are created equal. In fact, we are also discriminated here. Like we're like my part of the world by Western European countries, we're looked at as trash. You know, like savages and prostitutes. So, you know, so that's where I get very defensive and angry in the comments, because I feel like people really do not get the dynamics in Europe, actually. So it's interesting to see that India is making strides there. Do you have any kind of other knowledge apart from defense, what's happening, and like what is the strategy that he was trying to allude on? Because apparently India cannot afford to do the same things as China. So I'm just very curious. Anything that you guys know about this, please pop it down in the comments below. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. And if you did enjoy, please give a thumbs up, share, like, and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, please do take care. I am sending lots of love. Bye-bye.